Chapter 7. Ignem Caelumque. From the bridge, Commander Young watched the storm swirl across the atmosphere of Acheron 117. It looked a bit like the swirls of milk in his latte. Any luck? No, sir. It took the tech at the comms several seconds to reply. In a crisis situation, that would have been unacceptable. Young sipped his coffee. Can you compensate? The tech blinked at the console. Can I? One would hope. Young bit off a sigh. It's a basic skill for that station. The tech had the nerve to look incensed. He sullenly punched keys. Young had to have a word with the other officers, these Armstrongs. Loyalty was no substitute for skill. They were proving that now in their struggles to perform even basic tasks. Had Young had his way, senior techs would have been appointed to the empty bridge stations. That's what the regs called for. Young could only conclude the captain was punishing him. He took another sip. The away team had been out of communication since the order to reconvene. Since then, the storm had scattered any messages to or from the ship. Hardly an uncommon occurrence. Planetary to orbital communication was rarely better than fragile. Had he been left with a competent crew, Young could have left them to it and enjoyed his coffee from the wardroom. Instead, he got to babysit. If Osai were here, this wouldn't be an issue. But the communications officer was down there with the rest of them, taking the comms officer off the bridge when a storm was brewing. Absurd. But he took the best datapad footage, and knowing the captain, and the promise of plunder, he wasn't about to let himself be filmed from non-flattering angles. Young glanced back at the comm station. Whether out of incompetence or insolence, the Armstrongs still hadn't adjusted the signal strength. Technician, stand aside. You! He snapped at the cog, standing statue still by the captain's chair. Take the comms. The cog moved with disturbing precision to the seat vacated by the red-faced Armstrong now sulking in the corner. The seat sagged under its weight. Compensate the comm signal and analyze the storm, Young told it. The storm appears to be localized above the landing zone, the cog reported without inflection. It adjusted levels on the console. The entire region has been lost to our scanners. Compensation has proven ineffective. Odd for a storm that small. How long have they been out of contact? And I mean approximately. I don't need it down to the second. Approximately 11 minutes, Commander. Any loss of communication with an away team for more than 3 minutes is considered a crisis. Well aware. A light crisis. One no worse than having shit techs on the bridge. He'd be more concerned if scans had revealed any life signs below. Still, Seagrave had been pretty pissy since he contracted that stomach bug. If Young did nothing, as Seagrave himself would have done in this situation, the captain would find a way to hold it against him. The cog was staring at him. Young hated that. They never blinked. Could we launch a comm beacon? Skip it across the upper atmosphere? Just far enough to get a signal down under the storm before it's blocked by the curvature of the planet? The cog's eyes twitched as it calculated. Theoretically, Commander. But it would require modifications to adapt the beacon for atmospheric conditions. Do it. Relay it to one of your clones. The cog went rigid. Message conveyed. Boyer, the ship's gangly second officer, hustled over with his brows furrowed. Young fought down a wince. Is that wise, Commander? Boyer spoke loud enough to be heard by the Armstrongs. The beacons are for deep space communication. Indeed they are, Young replied. Hence the modifications. But what if we need it for deep space communication? That's why we have 6 of them. Young wasn't sure which annoyed him more, being saddled with the Armstrongs or stuck with the scion of the Boyer family. We can fish it out of Atmo once the away team's returned, and converting it back will give the techs something to do. Boyer nodded. But what if we need it for deep space communication? Young screamed behind his eyes. Legacy. It was the only thing that carried as much weight in the coalition as property. And the Boyers were Legacy's champion parasites. They were the descendants of some great hero, some admiral who'd won a critical battle a century ago. His multitude of progeny had been piggybacking on his accomplishment ever since. Pretty much every ship in the fleet had a Boyer now, a legion of mediocre, incurious dullards born into unmerited power. How the Armstrongs envied them. Young put on a smile. You know, Lieutenant Commander, the captain is likely to be famished upon his return. Go make sure his cabin is fully stocked. Boyer looked as if Young had offered him a bag of fish heads. That's hardly a job for an officer. You're hardly an officer, Young didn't say. In any fair universe, Boyer would never have risen past the rank of technician. You want to tell the captain we let a tech touch his personal effects? Boyer paled. Oh, goodness. He hurried off towards the cabin to fail with aplomb. Young savored a moment of silence before tapping his badge. Young to teleporter. Fuller here, sir. Fuller, the Buddhist with the shaved head. Any chance you've found something to lock onto down there? Negative, sir. Interference from the storm is too severe. It's also not behaving normally. Explain? Particulate storms typically have a fluctuating effect on the teleporter lock. A signal will get through microseconds at a time, but it gets lost again before a lock can be established. It's a phenomenon that intensifies and ebbs with a storm. But those fractions of signal aren't even coming through? Correct. It's like no signals are being sent. Young grunted. That certainly wasn't normal. The storm must be particularly strong. All right, keep on it, and keep me updated. Aye, sir. Commander. The cog was staring with those soulless eyes again. Beta shuttle has emerged from the storm. Young turned to the viewer. On screen. When it popped up, Young almost dropped his mug. The shuttle was scarred almost past identification. It looked like it had been used for target practice. The shuttle appears to be damaged, said the cog. No shit. Looks like it lost a knife fight with a garbage disposal. Scans indicate the vessel is missing key structural elements, said the cog. It is also well over its carrying capacity. A pit formed in the bottom of Young's stomach. Any sign of Alpha Shuttle? Negative, Commander. Beta Shuttle is hailing us. Put them up. The screen erupted in shrieks and static. The shuttle's interior looked like a train car overpacked with refugees. Screams from its passengers almost drowned out the bursts of sparks popping off damaged conduits. The woman flying it was not the shuttle's pilot. Young recognized her, the crew liaison, the one who'd stumbled drunk onto the bridge to volunteer the night before. She didn't look drunk now. Her eyes were as wide as saucers. Dependents! We've got injured! We need to take people to the infirmary! I would recommend against that, Commander, said the cog. Teleporter beams may further destabilize the shuttle. That's a negative, Tech. Young saw soldiers in black, techs in red, but no purple. Who's in command? The pilot moved aside, as much as she could. The shuttle was packed tighter than a sardine tin, revealing a bruised and sullen lieutenant commander. Mr. Blackwell, Young was relieved to see an officer. Situation report. I can deliver that in private, Commander. Where's the rest of the bridge crew? A message best related in private, sir. Young's throat felt dry. He felt the Armstrongs at the consoles eyeing him. Where's the captain? Is he with you? We were attacked, said the pilot. Hostile Xenos, swarms of them, all over the landing site. That's classified, spat Blackwell. Secret's out, I'm afraid. Xenos? Young felt baffled. Life signs were negative. They were still negative when they were overrunning us, said the pilot. We've got wounded. Young hid his badge. Triage units to the shuttle bay. And security, added Blackwell. Full strike team. Are you being followed? Asked Young. They had no tech that we saw, said the pilot. Again, Commander, this is information best relayed in private. Mr. Blackwell, what the hell happened down there? This, the pilot hit a button. The feed switched to footage from the shuttle's exterior. Through the whirling chaos of the storm, a swarm of silvery, mantis-like creatures waded through the fusillade of fire to pull soldiers apart as easily as paper dolls. Young's head swam. He steadied himself on the command chair and tapped his badge. Young to Fuller, keep trying to get a lock on survivors. Survivors? What happened? We're still putting that together. Blackwell slapped off the comms. You will not insert yourself into conversations between officers. Webb didn't look at him. She didn't dare take her eyes off the monitor. The relaying of critical information is the duty of the commanding serviceman, who is me, assigned to the shuttle. The tech you left in charge is too drunk to stand, and the pilot is dead. I was next in line, just following protocol. The shaking dropped away as the shuttle popped out of the atmosphere. Ahead, the great silvery bulk of the Independence loomed into view. traversing ever so slightly to offer the shuttle an angle towards its bay. Webb steered towards the hangar, hit the maneuvering thrusters. The shuttle didn't change its vector. A negative chime. Webb's console flashed red. That's not good. What does that mean? 8's face was a pale mask surrounded by agrichem dust. I'm not sure. Webb flipped some switches. Swank, get up here.
Yeah?
The shuttle tech clambered forward through the mass.
What's wrong?
Something with the maneuvering thrusters. She tried turning the shuttle. Her console flashed red again. Swank tapped some keys.
We're not reading as compromised in the damage report.
Which was considerable. I can't steer, she tried. More warning lights. He called up a schematic.
Looks like the flow of thrust is impeded.
By what? Dust from the storm, said Blackwell. Obviously.
Might be,
said Swank.
Won't know for certain till we look inside.
We've got more pressing issues, said Webb. They were darting with deceptive speed towards the shuttle bay. They were also arcing to starboard. At their current trajectory, they'd clip the side of the hangar entrance and wind up debris orbiting the ship. She tried the thrusters again. No luck. Swank noted their trajectory.
We're not going to make the bay.
Webb stomped down a surge of panic, tried to keep her hands from shaking on the controls. Everyone, brace for a crash landing. I'm what? 8 looked back over the sea of wide eyes. There's nothing to hold on to. We cut out the struts. Reynolds was in a crash landing once, muttered Adler, his arm in a sling. Inertial compensators failed. He wound up soup on the view screen.
Calm the bay,
said Swank. Of course. Webb toggled the comms. Shuttle bay, this is Beta Shuttle. Thrusters are compromised. Requesting immediate tractor beam for tow-in. Copy, calmed the landing crew. Hunker down, everyone, Webb called over her shoulder. This is gonna get bumpy. Soldiers ducked and covered. The redshirts who could stand braced themselves over the wounded. Even Blackwell steadied himself against his console. Marwazi, his eyes half open, didn't seem to react. Webb hoped he wasn't too far gone. The tractor beam shot out of the bay's emitter. It seized the shuttle, shaking it violently but pulling it into a more central position. They've got us. The shuttle abruptly shook. Klaxons blared. A crack opened in the forward bulkhead and raced above the view screen.
Okay, that's bad,
said Swank. Severe structural damage, warned the computer. Prow in danger of breach. Beam's too strong, Webb yelled over the comms. Dial it back! The beam is already at minimum, said the tech. Turn it off or you'll tear us apart! Copy. The beam winked out. Webb hoped they were aligned enough to make it in. The shuttle bay entrance ahead went from the size of a postcard to a book to a house. Webb's heart pounded like a rabbit's. They were coming in too fast. At this rate, they'd plow into the bulkhead at the back of the bay. Switch beam from pull to push, she calmed. 1 second burst. The shuttle hit the bay floor in a grating shower of metal flakes. Had the bay been pressurized, the sparks would have been incredible. With a blinding flash, the emitter spat out a tractor beam pulse. It hit the shuttle in the starboard prow, spinning it like a top. The force of the spin pressed the crew to the walls and nearly threw Webb out of her chair. The shuttle careened up on its side before it rocked, dropped, and settled. The shuttle bay airlock whisked shut with a clang. Somewhere behind Webb, someone puked. At the press of a button, the shuttle's sides slid up. Out tumbled redshirts and a handful of soldiers, the ones who could walk anyway. The shuttle had spun completely around and was now facing the airlock. Webb took in the deep gouges and skid marks from their entry. Not my best landing. Anyone you can walk away from, said 8. To be fair, it's been a few years. You still got us home. Yeah. Webb's stomach had yet to stop spinning. Home. Medical staff was already there, performing triage on the cargo bay floor, administering hyposprays to the walking, stasis plaques to the wounded, and sheets to the unresponsive. Anyone they stabilized, they slapped with a teleporter tag. Those patients vanished in whiffs of ozone, teleported straight to the infirmary. She spotted Marwazi among the bodies on the floor. She unbuckled and climbed out, picked her way through the groaning survivors. Rob was administering to the doctor when she made her way over. Is he going to be okay? Rob's face was slack with shock. Whatever platitude he was thinking of saying died on his lips. It's bad. He tagged the doctor with a stasis plaque and a teleporter tag. Webb squeezed Marwazi's hand. Doc? Haroon? We're home now. Come on back. He didn't return her squeeze. He couldn't. Not frozen in stasis. His hand went intangible and vanished as the teleporter stream whisked him away.
Hey.
Swank, limping, was hanging off Adler. Looks like he'd been hurt on the landing.
Thanks for getting us out of there.
Thought our number was up, said Adler. Yeah, said Webb. Kinda did too. Sorry about the bumps.
I'll take 'em,
said Swank. 8 was blinking rapidly, as if she couldn't believe she was actually back on the ship. Are all away missions like this? The ones that are don't make the recruitment vids, said Webb. 8's shoulders sagged. The lieutenant. One of the good ones. A lot of folks didn't make it back. There are still people down there. There are. Sivos and the soldiers who covered their retreat. Some more red shirts, and whoever was left from the bridge crew. Webb windmilled her arms at the hangar's maintenance crew, who were gawking at the damage to the shuttle. Hey! One of them turned, incredulous.
The bunking hell happened. You go through a meteorite shower with your shields down?
Xenos, Webb said flatly. The tech stared at the slashes in the hull.
Xenos did this?
Don't ask me how. Webb had no idea how to explain it. The arm blades popping out of forelimbs, the sheer weight of them on the shuttle's back, the maddening insectoid chittering. She set a hand on the jagged shuttle hull. When can this be flight ready?
You're kidding, right?
Let's pretend I'm not.
The inside alone will take days to refortify. The hull,
she shrugged.
There's also something wrong with the thrusters,
another tech said from behind the shuttle. I noticed that, Webb told them. Maneuvering thrusters were down when I was bringing her in.
Where's Alpha Shuttle?
Asked the first tech.
Are they circling? There's no room to land with all the wounded in here.
It went down, under a xenoswarm. Webb ground her eyes shut. They must have punctured a plasma line or something. I don't know. It's gone.
Lured.
Yeah. The techs abruptly straightened. Webb turned, saw Blackwell marching towards her, scowling, flanked on either side by fresh pairs of soldiers. He stabbed a finger at her. Arrest that technician! The soldiers started her way. Swank and Adler put themselves in front of her. The hell do you think you're doing? Guys, said Webb, not a good idea. If they don't move, said Blackwell, arrest them too. Young shouldered his way through the crowd. I'm still waiting on that situation report, Mr. Blackwell. So, Blackwell saluted, indicated Webb with his eyes. This technician refused multiple direct orders during the evacuation. Her actions delayed us and exacerbated crew casualties. That's not what happened, growled Adler. Young looked them over. The captain? Dead, said Webb. Young and the soldiers stared at her. Winesboro, too, and Osai. Marwazi was badly injured. I'm not sure about the rest. Young took in the crowd anew. Is this all there is? Because of her, hissed Blackwell. We could have evacuated more of the officers and soldiery had she simply followed. Whatever he said next was drowned out by shouting redshirts. An angry press of them carried her forward. The soldiers closed ranks around Blackwell and Young. One looked ready to raise his rifle before Young halted him with a look. She got us out of there, yelled Adler.
After he teeped us out,
added Swank. Blackwell clenched his jaw. There is a clear order of priority during an emergency evac. Had my orders been... Is this true? Young stared at Blackwell in disgust. Did you teleport service members out of the shuttle? He did, said Webb. We barely made it back in. We wouldn't have if Sivos hadn't come back for us, said Adler. He's the hero here. And where is he now? Still down there, said Webb. We were ordered to leave him behind. By the LC here, said Adler. Swank smirked at Blackwell.
That's quite a shiner, sir.
Commander, Blackwell turned towards Young, walling them away from the red shirts. I made a hard call, under duress, to ensure the survival of the highest priority crew. Young eyed him flatly. That's not a denial. If we could speak about this in private. Young eyed Swank's insignia. Shuttle tech.
Aye, sir.
Send the shuttle's teleporter logs to my quarters. Swank grinned wickedly.
With pleasure, sir.
Commander! Blackwell stiffened. This is highly irregular and completely unnecessary. You're dismissed, Mr. Blackwell. He mashed his comm badge. Young to teleporters. Fortex replied. Webb's heart leapt when she heard Frankie's voice. It sunk again when she recalled how poorly their last parting had gone. Still needed to patch things up there. Initiate emergency evac, said Young. Teleport anyone you can get a lock-on planet side directly to the infirmary. 80% signature threshold is authorized. A chorus of ayes. Young hit his badge again, twisted it a quarter turn to send his words through the ship. Attention crew, this is Commander Young. We've got people stranded down on that planet, including our captain. Priority 1 is getting them back. Engineering, can you modify a tractor beam to scatter some of the particulates in that storm? Maybe, Dewey called back. But without anything solid to push, it'd be like pissing in the wind. Can you reroute teleportation beams to that comm beacon we sent into Atmo? A pause. We'll get right on it. See that you do. Security, full fire team to the shuttle bay. Copy. Beam weapons, said Webb. Young looked her way. Phototherm did nothing, she added. Just knocked them back. Beam weapons didn't hurt them either, but were more effective at moving them around. Young looked incredulous. Then he looked to Blackwell, who nodded curtly. Beam weapons only. Bring extra cells. Copy. Fire team en route. Young swung to the shuttle crew. How soon can that wreck be space-worthy? The tech Webb spoke to ducked out of the interior.
A few hours, sir. We have to weld in new struts to keep it from imploding when it hits Atmo.
Bunk that, said Young. Fab what you need. I'll handle the paperwork. Blackwell actually gasped. The tech ducked back in as the other propulsion tech poked his head out from the thruster assembly.
We've also got an issue with the thrusters.
Young sighed. What kind of an issue?
Something's blocking them.
Insectoid chittering drifted out of the thruster. The tech looked back at it curiously. Something jerked him back in. Webb stiffened. Out of the thruster burst 3 Xenos. Their carapaces burnt black and cracked like a pattern of celadon glaze. They moved with a skittering, nightmarish ease, apparently no worse for having been bathed in thruster plasma. They skated towards the knot of crewmen like water striders across a pond. Security! Young managed to draw his sidearm before an alien plunged its blades through his chest. Crewmen scattered. Blackwell pushed his way through the soldiers and bolted for the lifts. True to their training, the soldiers dropped into a rank and fired. Their bolts reflected off Xeno carapaces to spark against the bulkheads. Get out! Webb felt like she was moving through quicksand. You can't fight them! The red shirts who'd been on the surface needed no prompting. They were already halfway to the lifts. Swank limping along between Adler and 8. One of the Xenos was right on their heels. Close the doors! Webb yelled at the control station. The tech there snapped out of his torpor. His hands flew over the controls. Then his hands flew across the room as a Xeno waded through him like a wave made of knives. It skittered towards the lifts. Webb slid to a stop behind the console, slapped the lift controls. Across the room, the overcrowded lift slammed shut behind the techs. The pursuing Xeno slammed into it, rebounded, and started hacking at the shaft. Webb coolly realized she was the last tech in the room. Only she and the soldiers were left in the bay, and given how she could no longer hear rifle fire, she was the only one left standing. More chittering. Webb glanced over the console, saw the other 2 Xenos skating from the soldiers' bodies towards the lift shafts, the shafts that led directly to the most trafficked corridors in the ship. She wrenched up the console's emergency panel. Its interface prompted her for an access code. She entered Dewey's. The console chimed compliance. Up rose the emergency lever. One of the Xenos turned Webb's way. Its compound eyes glimmered. It chittered something. Webb couldn't come up with anything pithy to say, or think. Maybe it was good that her mind was blank. She hoped Marwazi would think of her fondly if she saved the ship. It would be a nice way to be remembered. She wondered which pre-gen homily would be read for her, and pulled the lever. The airlock split open, roaring like a wounded god. Klaxons screamed. The temperature plummeted. Webb gripped the emergency restraints as everything in the bay, the shuttle, the bodies, and the 3 thrashing aliens, went hurtling out into the stars. A heartbeat later, her numbed hands gave way, and she too was hurling towards the void.